transportation deficiency system, and it's a database that we keep nationally, but also here on Navajo we have our own SDS list. And essentially, Congress many years ago, I think it was in 1988, passed a law, Public Law 94-437, that said Indian Health Service had to keep an inventory of unmet needs of sanitation facilities. And so ever since that time, we have created a list of all the water, sewer, and solid waste needs for the Navajo Nation, and we keep it in this database of SDS. So it's essentially a list of projects to get all homes on the Navajo Nation served with water and sewer. It's basically trying to get everyone with satisfactory water and sewer and solid waste, but water and sewer is the primary goal. And every year we update that list. We fund projects off that list, and we update those lists. And the letter that you see was the last official information from that list. And every year we're going through it right now. We're updating those projects because in January, we got an allocation of about $30 million from our headquarters office to fund projects off of the list from last year. And so we're funding about 40 or 50 projects this year off that list, the ones that scored on the highest. And we do that all the time. We do that every year. Our funding used to be, when I first got here, about $8 million for projects on the list. This year, it's all the way up to $30 million. So we've been getting more and more every year. And this has been our process for many years of funding projects, water, sewer, no solid waste, but those projects are still on the list, but they're further down. So we're funding a lot of projects every year. And like Rachel said, we're in the middle of our current SDS update, and that won't be completed until the end of this year. We're going through a lot of different reviews. We'll have our first review in July, and then another review in August, and then it won't become official for FY 2022 until the end of the year. So that's SDS in a nutshell. So one of the other attachments that we did provide, I don't know if I can share it, but there were two other attachments, and one was an SDS list of just a snapshot of those projects in SDS as they exist right now, the unofficial list, and it was organized by council delegate. So hopefully that will assist all the different delegates and chapters in identifying the projects that we have in SDS currently. I think the list was the attachment had at least 5 pages, and it was 352 projects were on that list, and it was all organized by the council delegates' names. So let me know if you want to look at that. But then the third item was was what we call PDS, which is our project data system, which Rachel also referred to. That shows all the projects that we have on our plate right now. 944 projects, currently estimated at a total value of $641 million. And that's the workload we currently have on our plate. All the funding that we have, that we're trying to either close out projects that we've actually built. There's many of those on that list. They're color coded. that is about, I don't know, 292 million, almost 293 million dollars worth of projects that we've actually completed construction, but we have to do all the as-built drawings, and we have to do the transfers to NTUA on most of those. But it includes all the ones that are in construction, all the ones that are currently in design and planning. So it's just to give the committee and the chapters and the council delegates an idea of what our current workload is at the moment. So we're very very busy, I must say, with many funded projects currently. And as Jason John alluded to in his talk earlier, that there are a lot of projects on the list that have been funded or are to get funding with CHSN and permanent trust funds that we're still in the process of doing planning. A lot of those are still in the planning phase, even though we've had those projects on our books basically for like 4 years. There's a lot of planning that's still, when we say planning, we have to do archaeology, we have to do the right-of-way. Sometimes the right-of-way and getting the clearances takes a couple of years, and especially with the staff issues that we have of workload and not having enough resources, things have not progressed as fast as everyone would like. So many of these projects are still in planning. So those are the documents that we distributed, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about any of those or any other questions you might have. Thank you.
Speaker Damon, put me in the queue. This is Vice Chair Smith.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald. And again, thank you for being here with us. And thank you very much, Ms. Brown, too, as well, for starting off the report. Let me go to the floor. At this time, there's only ones in the queue is Vice Chair Smith. Vice Chair Smith and Honorable Otto. So, Vice Chair Smith, floor is yours.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank you, Mr. McDonald. Good to hear your voice, and I know we've been working quite extensively for certain projects that are going forward. I guess my question is, you have a lot of projects here, but and the ARPA funds. The question is, excuse me, how much is being provided to IHS to offset these costs and providing water to homes out there? I see the green, it's fully funded, but some of them are not actually kicking off for construction. That's the second question. If they're fully funded, that means they're just waiting to be phased in for construction. And I heard earlier, the council was saying, and Water Resources was saying, maybe they could outsource. I know that you always say we outsource is going to cost more. And that's the thing about outsourcing for construction, but we rely on NECA, and NECA has, I guess, a ton load of requests on behalf of their construction to continue helping getting water to the projects to homes. The other one is the yellow indicates that construction is completed. Is that how I read that? And then the beige is basically closed down, projects that have been closed down. The one I'm concerned about is the fully funded in design. For example, the Lupton project in my area, you well know probably about it, is that Coyote Canyon Lupton housing, and that's to bore under the I-40. And we talked to Rosalind So about this, and it seems to be moving at a turtle speed. How do we expedite this faster and quicker and getting these things moving alone? Not only the project within that area, there's also that Q84. I keep getting questions. When are they going to start construction? Citizen has pumped dollars into it, and that was back in 2017, I think, at a price tag of $3.5 million. The reason why I'm saying this is because COVID-19, everything's going up. The prices, materials. Is this going to be enough money? Is this going to be enough money to complete the project on behalf of these big projects? The other thing I want to ask too is, Shinandada Nosenigi, since we're getting ARPA money, and ARPA money will be coming down to get water out there to folks that need water. The question is these projects have been fully funded and they're waiting to be under construction. Are they going to be put back on the back burner, and the first ones that are going to be really prioritized is the ARPA funding? Because we have a time frame of 2024, I think, if I'm right or if I'm wrong on that. It may put these other projects on the back burner. And what I mean by back burner is they're funded, but the money's going to be there, and we're going to quickly move forward with the ARPA projects to get them completed, and then eventually come back to these projects that were already funded and ready to be in construction. How do we facilitate that? How does IHS facilitate that? Because the demand is there and the workload is there, but how do we balance that? Because I don't want to see some of these projects just sitting there another 3-4 years without any progress on them. And there's been work put into them, and folks have been waiting patiently, and some folks have gone home, meaning they've left us, they passed away. And they were excited when they first heard about it, but some have never seen running water in their homes. So that's the really big concern. The other question too is, Mr. McDonald, under number 310, you have Klagetoh, Navajo Station Cistern, and Transwestern Station Cisterns up in Klagetoh. And I understand that the project to get water up there is really rocky. And I've been working with Water Resources and Jason John. I don't know if he's still listening, but there was a well up there that Transwestern Pipeline was utilizing when they used to have homes up there, and they used to provide running water for their employees. But now that it's just become a pumping station, there's no employees that are living there. I was wondering if we could tap into that water source and run that to families that are not within the compound, but they're living around the Klagetoh Transwestern Station, since they already have cistern, and hook them up with that. I'd like to propose that because I hear that in the planning meeting, I hear that in the chapter meeting, not only those areas, but also Wide Ruins and Halk area and Lupton still are in need of water. And it was kind of disheartening to hear Jason John saying that the big project that was supposed to be funded for the Q84, where there was houses supposed to be developed in there, and it was a good plan, but however, water is the key. And Halk was the place that they were going to put a Bluestone and provide homes for folks over there, but apparently there's no water. So when I heard earlier too that the water table may be going down, and is there any study done to offset the population on behalf of the demand? Because that really relies on the water being available. We can't continue to provide, water to homes if we don't have the capacity on the population-wise or the capacity to do that. So those are the big concerns that I have. And I appreciate your report, Mr. McDonald. I appreciate this. And I know that it takes a long time for these projects to be actually completed. And it does take a lot of coordination right away, getting chapter resolution. And even if someone says, nope, you're not going to go across my grazing area, or you're not going to go across my allotted area, and that puts a big burden upon getting that water to families that really need it. So those are the concerns I have, Speaker. Thank you for giving me the time. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Let me go ahead and go on down, continue on. Honorable Otto, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the report from Indian Health Services for the information pertaining to the services that you provide through your program. And first of all, I'd just like to say thank you first. That tremendous amount of work that you guys do there. And I know that many years ago, I've been a staff member there, and I know how these projects are vetted and proposed, and how the process goes. And kudos to the engineering techs out there that are working for you guys, and then especially the engineers that actually want to come on to Navajo. And and a lot of them at the time, Indian Health Services, they come in as commission corps, but they're only here for a couple of years. And I really commend them. But we have Navajo engineering students that are out there who graduated and has not really, stepped into that field there and on the nation. They're working off the reservation, and we know that they're probably making a lot more money. But I wish the Navajo Nation policy would be that if you get Navajo Nation scholarship, you have to come back to work for the nation or an entity on the Navajo Nation for so many years. That would address the shortages of engineers that are needed, or even the technical aspects of engineering technicians. We are exporting our natural resources off to the nation. And for me, stating our natural resources, our children. We're exporting them to grow the outside economy. and it's just, it's sad to see. I have a son that's an engineering student, and he just signed on with Santa Fe Railway, the BFC or that, and he's trying to look for college money to pay for college. And but he had to do what he had to do. But what I'm getting to is that we really need our engineers to come back to the nation to help Indian Health Services out there with these projects that are funded through Congress. And what I would really request Indian Health Services to do is that maybe if your team can set up a 101 session for our council delegates so that they can understand how the right-of-way process, the design process, the preliminary process goes when a project is in progress, from planning to designing to permitting to clearances being cleared and drafting and the pre-construction phase and the construction phase. And that would really, really shed light to leadership on the actual process, because for us to say hurry, we want water right now. They're not really understanding the actual process that happens, because, like I said earlier to Mr. Jason John, wash crossing costs a lot of money. Road boring, what Mr. Vice Chair Smith spoke to, costs a lot of money, basically, and all these other upgrades. They really need to, the basically, Indian Health Service didn't have that that way, we need to really understand the process on how our engineering technicians and our engineers, what process they go through to get a permitting and to get a project through. Even if it's a scattered project is not lengthy like a mainline water line extension, or building a sewer lagoon, or building a sewer line. Scattered project, and maybe that type of a setting could shed light to leadership so that they understand. And then the other thing on Indian Health Services is that where can the nation help you? We know that funding comes down in the form from allocation from Congress. But, when the water line projects need to be funded, it don't hurt to ask the nation, can you guys fund the planning aspects? A planning project probably costs about $50,000 to $100,000. I think, and it don't hurt to ask for that from the nation to get the planning and designing and permitting done with those dollars. But the nation tries to wait for these plannings to come in, and the program of Indian Health Services has to rely on the number of homes, and that just determines that this project is not feasible. Or if there's too many wash crossings, that just kills the project. So how can the nation start partnering up with Indian Health Services? I think another dialogue that we should start looking at. That way, when these projects are planned out and planning funds are funded, the construction costs will come down from Congress. That's just what I think. I'm just one delegate out of the 24, and that's just one of what I would suggest. And again, kudos to the employees of Indian Health Services. Yego Ajinson lead in the house Tanigi to Adela Beba Batanda Kawajada. Do Ashon in Lini Ade Bitos Ago Ade Toshe Tlos Ade Isba Hayandi Shanianzen Amado Ja Chini and the Ade Chedo Masan the Ajayan Sakis. But I guess moving forth, we need to look at a partnership with Indian Health Services on how we could help each other on some of these projects. And I think those are some of the dialogues that we need to the program there. Other than that, the other thing too, Indian Health Services, the actual number of homes that are feasible and not feasible, maybe if we have a list between those two, that way we have a correct number to say that, this is how many homes are feasible, and we can try to help this many families. These homes that are not feasible, why are they not feasible? Is it too rocky? Is there too many wash crossings? Is there too many road boring that's going to happen? That's going to increase the cost of construction, or is it whatever? Is the homesteading, the home located above a storage tank elevation? I think that's one area that we need. That way, we're not saying we got 15,000 people that don't have water connection. What is the actual number that is feasible? And I think that's the area, that's the number that leadership can work with from here forth. So I appreciate the time, and yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm going to continue on down. I got Honorable Keon Begay, then I'll come back to you, Mr. McDonald, Ms. Brown. Honorable Keon Begay, good afternoon. Floor is yours.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Speaker Damon, Chairman, Ado Kudo, IHS, believe it's Ms. Brown, and then Mr. McDonald. Good afternoon. My main question, and I'm sure you were listening to my other comments to water management from the Navajo Nation, although these are two different situations, but it comes back down to the issue of getting water to our Navajo people. I very much have an issue where the federal government it seems as though that we're just supplementing what the federal government should be funding. And I know it's been a small amount of funding that the federal government or IHS has been funding the SDS listing based on whatever was available for that year is all the IHS could construct as far as water line. So we still have over, I believe it's 600 or 700 listing right now. If we go with the norm, I'm sure it's going to be for another 20 to 30 years that whoever is at 700 will be able to get the water. So how do we incorporate to request the federal government that let me take a step back. The nation is receiving funding. In a heartbeat, I support getting the funding, appropriating the funding for the waterline project. But it comes to the question, why are we supplementing the federal government's responsibility? I know that you're not in a position to make that argument, but how is it that you can make the recommendation to the Navajo Nation to say that, okay, we're receiving $1.8 billion, but there's other needs that the Navajo Nation is wanting to utilize this funding, but not but we're more of putting setting aside almost half of it for a water line project. So that decreases the funding availability for our projects.
Hello, Mr. Speaker. Can you hear me?
Yes. We're just trying to see if Keon Begay got back on the line.
Okay, thanks.
McKeon, you back on the line?
Chairman, yeah, no,
There you go.
and I'm not sure where you guys lost me. But the main point that I want to make the argument is that the federal government, the IHS, have more work to do aside from the advocacy for additional funding for all the projects that's on the SDS list. My point is that I know the IHS and Mr. McDonald and everyone else don't have a position to make this argument to the federal government, but to ourselves as to say that Nishit Kodo Halet Ala Washington based on his Huile Ashon his Huilaya or not Kong Aditron Leniki Hosato be Hohosni Koko Kodon hit Nabe Bakajana or Sato base or Honate Nako Equaki Yard and Leniki Ben Natanish Kodo Ton Leniki the Nabich Huitna. I don't have a problem. The Shinit Kodot net Hobich Hodot Nishiki, but Ashron Kodo based on Hanet, the Hankit or Argo, Totigo, Nande, Halet Ala Ecuador. How do we continue to advocate to say that maybe even though that we allocate funding for water line, could the federal government still needs to? We still need to tell the federal government to say that even though we're paying this water line, but you will need to continue to appropriate funding for this water line project. Housing that the other the quick machine or huge and yet the local chapters the nan ziniki paper kite or wasanki o kodo based on ziniki or to aja o yahanande na halendo list. For 8 years or oshitis and other ordinate the she to the net or topic had losanki koaki ho that's no najo loso. Not what another dot siki but not not end. So that's an area that I need to Halit Allah by Hadith Sim. And then the other one is that I know that some senator, the one from Arizona, Kudo Yohanat Latte, Washington, that didn't base of Papito, so Nene. Do you know if there's any update report that Senator Kelly is proposing to introduce or add a language to a bill to cover all the SDS listing for Navajo. Coco, I don't know if there's any word back from his congressional office or DC office. And then the other one, the connection of water line, because a lot of our chapters, community, obviously are connected at certain location. So a lot of our a lot of our community members have to wait on a project by the neighboring chapter in order to get water line. I believe three of my chapters are like that: the Gold Water Loop and the Mini Mules, and then the Three Turkey Ruins area. Those are the chapters, or our community members will need to be waiting on the neighboring chapter to complete their water project in order to extend the water line into the to the chapters that I represent. So that ego sto koto opopa atanit sto like for example, Three Turkey Ruins area, Nazlini, the Chinle area has to be completed in order for it to serve the Nazlini area. Mini farms, from Rough Rat down, the mini farms, the West Mesa, the Gold Loop in the Dahunanet and Blue Gap, the Low Mountain chapter, that territory area, that's what the Ecuador. The Gold Loop begin Haba, Bahadol, district and hit it north of Opa button, the Hisit Hash to there. So with that ego, Ecuador, based on Denicum constant and then Kodo did our Opa button it out conlated the Naki a yesterday, like the chapter then they dark go. A call did on hitch and how it did on hitch, Totastosa. So how do we go back to the federal government to say that they still need to allocate these waterline projects from their area rather than having the Navajo Nation have to supplement their responsibility? Chairman, yeah.
Thank you. With that, let me go back to Mr. McDonald and Ms. Brown. I don't know who would like to continue in the response, but turn the floor back over to IHS. Thank you.
Chairman, this is David McDonald. Hopefully you can hear me. I did get disconnected for a little bit there. I got back on when Delegate Smith was talking about outsourcing, so I don't think I missed too much, but I'll try and address some of the questions that I wrote down here. Regarding outsourcing, that's I believe Delegate Smith, you were asking about, have we looked at outsourcing? And to be honest, the only way, if the council or if the Navajo Nation decided that they wanted to fund, $1 billion or 500 million or whatever the number is of waterline projects, the current workload that we have is already overwhelming us, and the only way we can do anything with the ARPA money is if we, and you stated this too, the only way we would be able to build anything with the ARPA money would be to set aside what we currently have on our plate and focus only on ARPA. And I don't think you want us to do that. What I have on the screen and that list that you have of all the color-coded projects, we're working on those right now. We have to get those built. And the only way we're going to be able to do more work is if we stop something else. So outsourcing is the only way we're going to get more work done, in my opinion. And how to do that is really not an easy question to answer, because Jason John went over that. Somebody's going to have to contract out with companies that are off the reservation. We're going to have to get other companies to build things, and they're not equipped. They don't know the processes. It's going to be very difficult to do that. We are talking with NECA, and we are going to have a phone call. We've had several phone calls already, but we are having discussions with NECA on whether they can take on more workload, whether NECA can actually manage and do what IHS currently does, and that would be to design and they can construct. They know how to build things, but they would have to take on all the additional planning and design that we normally would do. And so we're trying to identify projects in SDS that would fit the bill, would possibly fit some of the shovel-ready requirements, the things that could be built within the time period, and that's really that's going to be very difficult for anybody to build a big water line within 3 years. It's not easy building water line. There's a lot of things, Delegate So, hit the nail on the head. There's all kinds of legal right-of-way issues, and then you've got the actual physical, not the geology, but the topography to deal with, wash crossings. You got rock, mesas, all kinds of things that you have to take into consideration. Power line is a big one because almost everything needs to be pumped, and you need to have the power to do all that, the electrical power. So there's a lot that goes into a water line project, and I don't want to go on and on about that, but the only way we're going to be able to do additional work than what we already have would be to try and find some alternative way to get that done. Not IHS. We're basically at our limit. I think we're not even able to get a lot of the work done that we have and that we've had on our plate for quite some time. As Delegate Smith has said, Q84 has been sitting there for a long time. We're trying to get that one started. We have turnover, we have staff turnover. There's all kinds of other things that have set that project back. So it's very difficult to get these projects done. So I don't know if I answered a couple of your questions, Delegate Smith, but that spreadsheet that we have all the color codes. The yellow projects, I think you were a little bit confused on some of the color coding. The yellow are projects that have started construction but have not completed construction. So they're in some of those. There's maybe a 6 or 12 month construction period. So a lot of those started construction maybe in 2019 and 2018, and they're still in some, they haven't finished all the water line or whatever they're building on those projects. So those are in the yellow. And then the ones that have actually had a construction completion are in the latter part, the brown category. But a lot of those, like the Many Mules project, phase 1, we ended construction over a year ago. We've built everything, but we're trying to get that water line turned on. It hasn't been turned on. So the definition of construction complete sometimes can be confusing. We've actually done all the work, but now we have some punch list items that we're trying to complete for NQA so that they'll take over that project. Sorry, I'm getting some feedback.
I'm not hearing anything, Mr. McDonald. Are you still hearing something? Go ahead and continue.
I'm sorry. Somehow I got muted, but I think I'm back on. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are. Yes.
Okay. I don't want to skip over any questions that may be out there, but I wrote down a few things from Delegate So. You know, a one-on-one would be great. I think we're all dying to have one-on-one meetings because these conference calls are very difficult. So you know, hopefully we'll have that opportunity soon. But I wanted to clarify something, Delegate So, that you do say quite a bit on feasibility, and I want to try and clarify what is meant by what is feasible and what is not feasible, because it is confusing that the SDS list, we have to categorize all those projects into feasible or infeasible projects, and the definition of feasible means economically feasible for IHS funding. So it's really only sort of a condition that has been enforced by Congress and by our headquarters that says if you go over a certain cost per home, the project is now infeasible for IHS funding. And there are many, many projects that get funded that are infeasible. It's not that it can't be built. You know, if you have enough money, you can almost build anything. You can build a bridge to Hawaii if you have enough money. But you know, it's really a feasibility of cost that IHS uses. And if a project exceeds it's around $107,000 per home. It's actually $107,500 per home. And if the project exceeds that amount, then it becomes infeasible for IHS funding. But it doesn't mean that the tribe or somebody else can't come in and fund it. In fact, that happens all the time. Many mules, all those phases in many mules exceed $107,000 per home. The phase one was around $153,000 per home, and that was funded with the Navajo Nation's funding. So it's not that we can't build an infeasible project. I just want to clarify that. You know, there are other projects that are very difficult. If the home is not lived in, if the home is abandoned, obviously we're not going to include those kinds of homes in our project. So hopefully I've answered that particular question. I'm just going to move on to Kealan-Bigay. You brought up some really great issues. I agree with you. Yeah, these ARPA funds, the Navajo Nation can decide what they want to do with them. You know, and our funding is limited by the amount that comes from Congress, and the Indian Health Service gets a budget every year, and it's all broken down. And sanitation facilities, we get a certain amount every year, and it would be great if we got more, and we could fund a lot more projects. But we did get $29.6 million this year, which is the most we've received from our headquarters in quite some time. Like I said, last year it was 26 million, and before that it was 23 million. It's been going up a little by little every year, but it certainly isn't enough to fund all the projects on SDS. So yeah, it's more of a political question, but yeah, you're right. I can't really answer your why is the Navajo Nation supplementing what the federal government should be doing all along. I can't answer that one. Let me know if I missed anything or if you have any other questions. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McDonald. With that, let me go on down. I have Honorable Elmer Brigade and Vice Chair Thomas. Nope. Vice Chair Walker, sorry. With that, Honorable Elmer Begay, floor is yours at this time.
Oh, thank you, Speaker. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Speaker, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Speaker. I wrote members of the Naabik'íyáti. I wrote Mr. Dave McDonald. Good afternoon to you. I'm calling from Dalcon, and I represent the southwest part of the reservation, which includes Teasdale, Dalcon, Indian Wells, Falcone, and Greasewood. And you probably know that there's no potable water for Dalcon, Teasdale, Indian Wells, Falcone area. So we had to do the community. Then depending on Greasewood shallow wells there for so many years right now. And now we're getting that, the drilled well from a cornfield, and they're working on it to make a direct connection to that treatment plant in the Greasewood area. And that's the only water source that we have. So right now, my question is, I know there's going to be $5 million that is lacking, and it's to improve the water system, about 12 miles of it, to get more water quality for quantity for the new construction of Dalcon Medical Center. So I'm not sure. I know that you mentioned about the 86121 system being funded, and each year they need it, but I'm not sure how much IHS provided funding for the hospital. But I think the funding that IHS funded for this hospital was the water that was supposed to be developed in the loop area for the loop to Dalcon lateral water project. But right now we know that they're having a difficult time over loop. So the construction is going to be completed in December. So we still going to be lacking water from there. So right now we're just depending on Greasewood. So that's why we want that, if that water line can be improved, but it's lacking $5 million, which was being engineered and calculated and estimated, made by NTUA. So I was wondering, I'm not sure, you're probably familiar with it because it's IHS project and coordinating with NTUA. So who's going to be requesting that fund? This ARPA funding, is it going to be requested through that from your agency? That's one question. And the other one is, I know that back in November and December, you mentioned that there's some engineers that left from these national parks or national service, forest service or something like that, but they're engineers, but they came on board with your program to do a design and planning for bathroom addition and septic tank and cistern tank installation. I don't know if they're still available. I know you mentioned that there's 3 out for Winslow area. I'm not sure if it's still like that. So they were helping with the engineering, drawing, and the designing. Are they still available? And also, how many drawings they did in the 5 chapters that I mentioned? because of that is I'm not sure. More likely, I think over here we like the way I mentioned it right now, we can see the SDS, but like I said, the water is limited, and I don't think we should be extending more water line. But I'm more looking at the rural area where this past December we got some power line extension. So these homes are ready for bathroom addition or septic tank and system tank installation. I was wondering who's updating all that, the new power line that was given, that was extended to these families. So maybe if you don't have the answer to that, then maybe who will be the person that I'll be speaking to update all the projects that are feasible for septic tank and system tank installation or bathroom addition. So that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Brigade. Let me go down to Vice Chair Walker. Vice Chair Walker, the floor is yours.
Can you hear me, Speaker?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Speaker Do, Chair of the Naabik'íyáti Committee. Although colleagues that are participating in this work session, good afternoon. Although the listening audience, our Navajo relatives that are listening to this work session also. And then the presenters from the Indian Health Services, Ms. Brown and Mr. McDonald, good afternoon. Thank you for the report. Very informative. I know that the IHS has been providing reports to the council periodically, and some of the same information again, but in light of the funding, ARPA funding opportunities. So the reports get pretty interesting. Somehow the projects come out more, they stand out more, because now that there's funding opportunity. So the chances of having those projects actually be worked on and be completed is real because of the funding opportunities that are there now. It's no longer just kind of wishing, hoping down the road somewhere that these are possibilities. They are now. It's like it's right at our doorstep. In the presentation is pretty interesting. So I want to just mention also the need for engineering staff. I know Mr. McDonald, we had a call several weeks ago in reference to projects out in Loop, homes that need to be serviced with water lines and sanitation facilities. At that time, you indicated the need for engineering staff within the Navajo area. And again, I'm hearing, that come up during today's work session here. So I would ask Mr. Speaker, your staff, yourself, put together a letter, send it to the IHS headquarters in Rockville, Maryland, just explaining leadership recognizes the need for more engineering staff, to just press that concern there. There's a critical need right now, and let that speak for the Navajo Nation instead of just talking about it here locally. Well, let's send word to Washington, as they say. So, Mr. Speaker, I would ask you to get a formal letter to do that, and let that speak for the Navajo Nation in this area. I know IHS is doing what they can, but it seems like we're recognizing it. We're talking about it. We know probably plans to fill those positions, but we're at the same time, we know time is of the essence. This morning, I had a call with one of the engineers out in Western Agency, and the engineer was overseeing the Yenta Service Unit, Tuba City Regional Healthcare, that service unit, and then Winslow Service Unit. So that's a whole section of the Navajo Nation, and then to have one engineer oversee operations there, that's got to be tough. And I know there's probably a plan of action to get more technicians and engineers and that. But I think the nation also should stand ready to advocate needs for the people, even if talking to the federal agencies. And when we talk to the federal agencies, we're talking to the trustee, our trustee. So they have a obligation, trust obligation, treaty obligation. So we should not be shy in doing that. Just be straightforward and say, hey, there is a need. We'd like to see this happen. Coming from the nation's leaders. I wanted to say that, Mr. Speaker, and again, I appreciate the discussion here. Pretty informative. I'd like to thank the IHS again. Although just to mention some of these areas that I represent out in the Western Agency, southwestern part of the nation, there's lava beds, there's rock bed, and that is the high cost to dig trenches in that area. Therefore, it makes projects infeasible. The nation could invest more money into equipment that could dig trenches anywhere, even in rock bed. I don't know which enterprise, which entity could actually invest more money into doing that. Ede Behatiste, Sunantado, speaker and presenters. Odela, say Odela Kambu.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Walker, for the recommendation, and that's the whole reason why we're having these to help assist in coming up with solutions. And maybe that's something that we could do collectively. I don't know. We can have a leadership meeting with Ms. Roslyn So, and then also other agencies as well to see what there is for assistant possibilities. So we will definitely work on that and get that over there to Maryland. And then also press the need for other agencies to see if there's assistance that can be developed too as well. So again, thank you very much, Vice Chair Walker, for that recommendation. That, colleagues, any other comments, questions at this time? I don't know anybody else in the queue before I go back to Mr. McDonald.
This is Vice Chair Smith. Vice Chair
Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, Speaker. Just hearing the dialogue and where we're going with this and what's happening, I appreciate Mr. McDonald's direct answer, and I was hoping that it wouldn't go in that direction. But in reality, that's what's going to happen. And all these dollars are going to have to be spent in a time frame. So, Speaker, all due respect with the report here, could we, as the Navajo Nation Council, as you being the Speaker of the Navajo Nation Council, write a letter to our Congress people, the President of the United States, indicating that we need additional resources? Because we heard it from Water Resources, they need additional help to get these things going. IHS is going to be bombarded. They already have enough work. And the money's there. Yes, the money's available. And I heard Mr. McDonald saying that if we have the dollars, we could construct all the way to Hawaii. But if we don't have the workers, then that project is going to sit there and sit there. So, Speaker, if that could be done through the president, through the three-branch government, reaching out to them and telling them, thank you for the ARPA funds plus the CARES money. However, the Navajo Nation is limited in the aspects of getting these projects done in a certain time frame, executing them, getting them completed, or maybe draft the legislation to support the fact that we need to call in additional resources to make sure that we get this water project, the water to people that really need water. Some of us do have water, and some of us know what it is like to not have water. So the folks that are out there waiting to get these water to their homes and to have that ability to utilize the water, the money's there. But Speaker, could we do something like that through your guidance, through your leadership? And I'm willing to endorse that letter as one of the Navajo Nation Council delegates on behalf of saying, we heard the report, we know what's going on, we know what we're up against. However, we do need additional resources, and give it to our senators in New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, and now that we have land in Colorado, provide that a copy to them and reach out to them. And it's not embarrassing to ask for help. It's not, we're in a situation, it's a situation that we are requesting respectfully for them to consider our situation out here. The dollars are sent, but the situation is still in what was provided by IHS, Water Resources, and I'm sure NTUA is going to say the same thing, and I'm sure NECA is going to say the same thing, and we just need to do that, Speaker. Thank you for letting me speak on that behalf, and I appreciate that.
Thank you. Let me go back to you, Mr. McDonald, if there's any further follow-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were a couple of questions that I wrote down from Delegate Begay. I'll try and answer those quickly. Regarding the Loop to Dilcon project, you did ask a question about the Dilcon booster. It's called the Dilcon Pass booster. The water in Dilcon is currently supplied from Lower Greasewood, which gets water from some wells right there in Lower Greasewood, and then some water coming down from Ganado from the new well up there. And you know that was brought up much earlier today regarding the water in Ganado. But anyway, the issue right now is that that water from Lower Greasewood has to be pumped not once but twice. It's pumped there at Lower Greasewood to a tank called Woodchop Tank, and then it flows gravity down for a little ways. I don't know how many miles, maybe 20 miles, and then there's this Dilcon booster that pumps to another tank that then gravity flows down to Dilcon, as well as a lot of other communities in that area. So it wasn't until fairly recently, in the last few months, that because of the hospital coming online and because of the water, the Loop to Dilcon water project not being will not be ready at the time that they say the hospital will open. There was more and more attention to this Dilcon Pass booster, and NTUA has determined that it's going to take around 5 million. That's a very rough number at this point, but they believe that booster has to be replaced, and they're saying the engineer on that is still working on some of the numbers and looking at the hydraulic model that we provided to them, to NTUA, a few weeks ago. But they're trying to narrow that project to exactly what is going to be needed there. So to answer your question, the 5 million, if it ends up being 6 million or whatever, NTUA, I believe, is going to request those funds, that funding be provided from ARPA, because nobody has 5 million currently just sitting there, I don't believe. I don't know. I think that's currently, NTUA will have to answer that, but I believe currently the plan is that they are going to try and finalize that booster design, narrow the cost down to exactly what's needed, and then see if they can get that funded with the ARPA money. So I hope I answered that question. Loop to Dilcon, I can try and answer that real quick. That project is going to be close to $35 million when we're all said and done. IHS has funded about exactly 15 million of that. The Navajo Nation with CHSN and Permanent Trust Funds is going to fund the balance. We currently have some documents, some MOAs in place and we're waiting for Jason John to try and get that funding of 19 million that we still need for that project. So construction has started on that. We're building water tanks. We're going to start the water line this summer. Let's see, PHS engineers, last year with CARES Act, there were some commission officers that were deployed from the U.S. Public Health Service to the Navajo Nation, and they came on the request of the Navajo Nation and Jason John, trying to build cisterns quickly by the end of the year. So they got deployed for several months towards the end of the year, and they designed, I think, 69 cisterns and septic systems. A lot of those homes were in the Dilcon area. They provided all those designs to Jason John. Jason has those. I believe Jason recently gave all those designs over to NTUA because NTUA has an interest in building those. They didn't get built. None of those got built. They ran out of time. But the designs are in the hands of NTUA at this point, and they are going to try and build those with ARPA money if they get the funding. So hopefully I answered those questions. That's all I've got, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That, colleagues, Rico, anybody else? Everybody texting in. Is there any further comments, questions for Mr. McDonald or Ms. Brown from IHS?
Speaker Damon, Delegate Begay, I have a follow-up question. Can you hear me?
Yes, Honorable Elmer Begay, go ahead. And I think to answer some of the questions regarding Dilcon, Mr. Kuntz texted in and he said that he's more than willing to help explain that a little further during his presentation. Honorable Elmer Begay. My Elmer Begay, you might have to press *6.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you, Speaker. Thank you, Mr. McDonald, for your response. My further question is, I know that I asked Mr. Jason John, but refer that question to you, IHS, that might be your project. You know that there's a windmill down in Loop area, the 5M94, and right beside about a few hundred yards away, you have the well that is drilled right now. They're doing the pump testing, and there was a dispute on it. So they were developing that well, so if it could be another alternative well where it's going to be, the lateral from Loop to Delcon. Do you know what the plan is on it right now? How they can do it? I know that the way I understood was to develop that well. It's going to cost $17 million. Do you know if that project is eligible for ARPA fundings? That was my question, Mr. McDonald. Thank you.
I can go ahead and answer that if you'd like.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. McDonald.
Yes. Okay. We've had a number of discussions about this, but I can go over it quickly again. That well that you're describing is what we call the 2B well. It's was drilled back in 2005 by I believe it was Bureau of Reclamation or USGS. I can't remember. Maybe it was USGS, but they did a number of wells down in that about 9 miles south of Loop, and it was a high production well. We had some interest in that well as a possible backup for the Loop to Dilcon project. So yeah, back in February, I think it was the end of February, we Department of Water Resources requested that we do some testing on that well. We went out there, and because the homeowners in that area were upset. Yeah, it's a long story, but essentially they stopped the test pumping process. I think we got enough information that we know what the water we don't know that we were going to test pump it. It had been almost 20 years since it had been last touched, so we wanted to just see if it was still a production well. But we were stopped by homeowners out there because they were concerned with the livestock well. They thought the test pumping would affect their livestock well, which was unfortunate. But so we didn't complete what we were going to do there. But the long answer is that well is to get that well connected to the Loop system. You're right. It would be at least $10 million because of there's no three-phase power out there. We would have to get a very long power line extended out there, and just building the water line from where that well is located back to Loop. It would be a very expensive project, but the benefit would be that those same homeowners that objected to the test pumping would have a water line then, and then could possibly get some water line extensions off of that main line to their homes. So there would be a benefit of getting that well connected in the long run, and it's certainly on the table for ARPA money, but getting it built within 3 or 4 years, that again, we're right back to the major problem that we have with most of these waterline projects is trying to get them built in the time frame. So hopefully, I don't know if I answered everything there, but right now the Loop to Dilcon, we have a good well right there in Loop, has plenty of water. We're trying to get the total dissolved solids to an acceptable level out of that well. We're going to be doing some modifications to that well. That's the W01 well in Loop. We don't need this well, this 2B well for that project, but for future, we're talking maybe 20 years from now of getting that 2B well connected would be great for everyone involved. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. McDonald, and thank you very much for being with us this afternoon. Seems like there's no other further questions, so we still have Navajo Tribal Utility Authority here before us too as well. So, colleagues, is there anything else from Mr. McDonald? I know that a lot of this is overlapping too as well. Where maybe Mr. Jason John can answer some of these questions, and then I know Mr. McDonald does his best to respond to as well. So thank you, Mr. McDonald. And then I know Mr. Rex Kuntz and his team on that side too as well. It's just like an integrated braid of working a relationship between them. So, colleagues, some of your questions might be next with Mr. Rex Kuntz, who does have the floor next. So, I
Speaker
don't know if
Kellen.
there's any further comments to Mr. Miss Brown or Mr. McDonald, but we can continue on to NTUA. Any further comments?
Speaker Kellen.
Yes, Honorable Keon Begay.
I just want to say thank you to IHS, specifically to the Many Farms OEH and Mr. Littlehead for helping my chapters, getting all the water line projects, helping the local chapters. So happy to meet the IHS staff. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That, again, key points, I guess, like I said, there's that interbradal working relationship between the three organizations. So I think on a wrap up, we can continue to have that at the end of NTUA's presentation. So without further ado, let me go over to NTUA and Mr. Rex Kuntz, and if there's anything else from the last presentation as an update. But I think they did send out one too, an updated presentation, and that was sent out at 10:40 this morning. So with that, I don't know who was speaking, Arash, Mr. Kuntz. I don't know if Haas is on himself. The floor is yours.
Good morning or afternoon, Mr. Speaker. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. And Honorable Navajo Nation Council, appreciate the opportunity to present to you and thank our partners, IHS and Water Management. Just kind of as a general start to help people understand a little bit about that relationship that has gone on for a long time, and there may be some need to modify and adjust some of that, or get involved in some of the overlap in order to execute projects. But water management works a lot on the large projects, big transmission mains, and water rights things and of that nature. And you'll hear Jason refer to bulk water projects, and that's what it is. It's moving large volumes of water across Navajo, and that increases the access. It takes greater volumes of water to places where it doesn't exist. And NQA's role is to take all these infrastructures that are built and constructed and to operate and maintain them, and to try to keep them running and providing services to the people. IHS traditionally has always been on the end of the residential services and has used the 86-121 program to provide those services. And the pandemic and other situations have all kind of challenged us with workforce issues and whatnot. So I know IHS has kind of been raked over the coals recently for not being able to execute the projects in a timely fashion. And several of you have mentioned projects that appear construction ready or fully funded, and yet they're not getting to construction. And those are the resource issues that need to be overcome. So with that, we originally gave you guys a 36-month global plan. It was quite overstated with a lot of projects on it. When what we were doing is we illustrated what we are capable of doing. We felt these were all executable within that time frame, but we also knew that the dollar amounts, we wouldn't get funded at that level. And I believe Mr. Moalemi Arish did explain that when he presented it. So that was presented early on, and that's kind of what we moved through. We all knew, as everybody's presenting projects, that the amounts requested are going to start to balloon and get quite large. So we're kind of at that stage, and then there's the purging process of getting it cut down and paired to what money we have available, and having to focus more on what the priorities are, and the criteria, and using criteria to try to determine what is available or what can we actually execute. And you heard several of the presentations today about lack of resources, lack of some of the designs not yet being done, some of the clearances, those types of things. And because of the 3-year period, some of those presentations are, we can get them ready, but they may not be ready to start work on right now. So, with that, we knew we would have to purge our list down to something that we felt is fundable. Now, the council here has been hearing the proposals, and with regard to infrastructure, it's been broken up into the different types of infrastructure. So today you're all looking through water and wastewater. Tomorrow's power. Thursday is broadband. But with that, we're taking our 36-month plan and we're pulling the utilities apart so that you can see it, so that we can present those things in pieces to you. And today we provided you with our water and wastewater project list. That's the overview. There is more detail to it, but we wanted to try to get through this quickly and help you understand what we are working towards. So we took our plan, and the top section is water, the bottom section is wastewater, and the first column of dollar amounts, if you go down to the bottom, you have the total of our total request in the original 36-month plan was $375 million in water and wastewater combined. So after our prioritization process and purging some projects and reducing some of the scopes in areas, but trying to keep our main priorities on the proposal, we've cut it back down to $186 million. So roughly maybe about half of what we originally came in with. So we've already gone through that purging process. We are very committed to this. We feel very strongly that we can execute it. We do have contracts in place. We have some that we have continued on from CARES Act. We work closely with Navajo Engineering Construction Authority, and we've already confirmed many of these projects with them that they have the capacity to handle them. So our resources are there. We have rights-of-ways already acquired for some projects. We're in the process of acquiring right-of-way for others. We have not stopped that effort. We are expending some funds ahead of award on right-of-way so that they're prepped and ready to go, which we did, with the CARES Act too. We had a handful of power line projects that were cleared, and we started with those, and as we got more clearances done, we kept feeding the construction, kept clearances in front of them. So we feel confident that we can continue with that process. There are other things like cistern systems that are within the home area, the solar projects. We won't have to, as long as they got a valid home site lease and they have their clearances, we feel we can keep everything within the home site area and get started on those projects. So there's a lot of background work and footwork that's already been done. For those home projects, we're doing all the feasibility ourselves. We have our engineering staff on the ground. They're out right now visiting homes and clearing them. For the home projects, we do have an application process, And as they come in, we do what's called the paper feasibility to make sure they meet all the requirements. And then we do the field feasibility. And once that's completed and confirmed from a field level that they're doable projects, then we finish the design drawings. And once we have an alignment for extensions and such, we feed that right into our right-of-way process and get the ARC and bio, and then go through the normal service line agreement process and get those processed. So we are already having some cross the line and come out the other side with rights of way. So we're in motions to prep those jobs. We have a good handful of projects that if we were funded relatively quickly, we could actually get started on construction right now on the service projects. A lot of our renovation and capacity projects are to either upgrade the line for new connections, much of what Honorable Otto So was alluding to, evaluating those things, sewer lines that are aged materials. We have sewer line projects where you can pull a very modern slip liner through the line, reseal it, and reinforce the wall. You basically replace that by inserting it. When you do that, we don't have to do any additional right-of-way, or we don't have to get additional right-of-way to do a parallel line. Those can be done through that process. So we're also in there, you'll see sludge removal, and I heard Honorable Eugene So speak about reservoirs and removing the silt and increasing the capacity. Something very similar can be done with wastewater lagoons, where you can go in there and you can do some sludge dredging, clean out the bottoms, remove the sludge that's been digested, and you can restore capacity and open up volume again. So there's projects like that are in our proposal here to make sure that we have capacity or to add capacity. We may actually need to modernize some of our plants. We may need to increase some of the sizing and add some cells. Those we will have to get a bigger footprint, but we already are working on rights of way to clear those. We have in there proposals for adding a few wells, doing some interties so that you can move water from system to system. So those projects are all part of our proposal. And some of the things may not be specifically named like wells, a couple of new wells, because we don't know what's going to get funded by ARPA, and if some economic development projects are built and some complexes or things of that nature, wherever those are built, we can accommodate. If the system is weak in capacity, we have those projects in there to make that adaptation to where it's needed. So we created some flexibility in our proposal so that we can adjust and adapt to what else the nation is trying to accomplish. So we're pretty confident that we can go forward, that we can finish these projects, and that we already have a lot of the background work done, the legwork done, and we feel they're all very executable, and we're ready to roll as soon as we get some dollars funded. We also have in mind, with the projects we did cut, that there is the American infrastructure bill that's going through the negotiation process, and that may help us pick up more infrastructure projects. So with the projects we've already vetted out that we've removed, we do now have another bucket full of projects that we can add if that other infrastructure bill goes through and more money becomes available in that respect. Just as some clarification, there are a couple of projects on Jason John's list that we may have already covered, but we'll highlight those and provide them to Jason and make sure that we don't double count something. We have gone through his list and we've highlighted the things that we would support. Projects like the settlement, Utah settlement will pull water out of the San Juan, treat it, but it only allows work in Utah. So it gets the water to the Utah boundary. Then from the Utah boundary to get past there and go into Kayenta, the nation has to find funds to extend that line that far. So that's on Jason John's proposal, and we would definitely support that. He's proposing some large watering stations along the new Cutter lateral system. We support those. There will be volumes of water. We won't have to worry about trying to dedicate watering stations just to residential water. We've always tried to restrict that just to be the human user. But with the volume of water we have coming through Cutter, we're more than happy to sell water to livestock owners and construction and ranchers and whatnot for those purposes. So that greater volume of water will make a difference in even how we operate in our policies. As far as the greater drought relief plan, I think some people may be a little confused. There is a drought plan, but the drought plan, if you look at it closely, it's called a drought response plan. So when you have a drought, like a short-term year or two drought, you go into response mode, and it goes into some conservation and restricting some things. N2A has its own drought response plan. Things like non-residential services such as car washes and laundromats may be restricted, closed down, or they may just be given limited hours, and you try to maintain water into the home. So those are the different mitigation plans on how to deal with it, but those are all short term. If you're talking about long term, where your water table's dropping and things like that, the overall bigger picture, which I believe the nation has had some foresight, is pursuing these water rights in the 3 states on Navajo with the federal government. So we have a ton of water coming into the Mexico side. The nation's just settled the Utah one, and there's a ton of water there. Arizona's still under litigation, but once that's there, there'll be additional water. So some of the groundwater wells, the surface water from the San Juan becomes the primary source, and the groundwater wells become backup sources. Now, there was dialogue about making sure that we capture that water, because it is water flowing, and it can pass us if we don't grab what belongs to us. And the one thing that we really wanted to emphasize at this point is that we did forget some things like creating storage on Navajo storage. Now, the Animas La Plata settlement, the Ute tribe was involved as like 7 interested parties that have water in that right, and they insisted on a reservoir, and that resulted in Lake Nighthorse right up there next to Durango. So Navajo has water behind that reservoir, and if we need it, we can call for it to be released. Comes down to Animas, it hits the San Juan just outside of Farmington, and it flows through Farmington's treatment plant. The Navajo Gallup project will put a treatment plant somewhere in the vicinity of Shiprock, and we'll be able to have that water, could bypass Farmington and come down onto Navajo, and we could pull it on Navajo and treat it rather than buying treated water through Farmington's treatment plant. So it gives us a little bit more independence and control. Once you have water coming from the Utah plant, you can take the Utah settlement water, but theoretically you could flow New Mexico water or Arizona water, because it's all coming out of San Juan. You could flow it through that treatment plant, take it out across the state line, and take it back into Arizona. So those are why all 3 of those are important, so that you get settlements in each state, and then it doesn't matter where you're pulling out of the river, but you can move it across those state lines. So that's the bigger picture response to creating that, but there still is a need to create some reservoirs on Navajo so that you can pull some of that water and store it. So if you ever have problems with the river getting low, you would have some backup storage on Navajo that you could pull in. So those are the dialogues that need to be explored a little bit deeper. There isn't reservoiring funded in any of the water rights settlements, so that's something that the nation needs to really look at and try to pursue. it's another conversation that you may want to have with the U.S. Government and the President's office. Delegate Smith, I believe, was the one that recommended that this body, the council, write a position letter to the federal government about the level of funding and some of the backup resource needs. And I think that's a very, very good recommendation, because it is illegal for federal employees to lobby the federal government. So it puts the local IHS guys, Dave and Rachel and their bunch, in a position that they're not really able to go lobby for more money. They can deal and manage with what they receive, but the allocation of money happens at a much higher level, and they're prohibited from lobbying for it. So it has to come from the nation to higher government to change that flow of volume and resources. Now, during the CARES Act, the IHS headquarters did send an engineering team and some coordinators that came on to Navajo. They had another separate funding stream, which they used, they managed, they did some design work. They're the ones that put in a lot of those transitional watering points. But they had a workforce here, and they were executing, and it didn't put an additional load on Dave McDonald and Rachel Brown's staff here. They had another workforce that came in and supplemented. So they've done it already. We just need to have them continue to commit that type of a resource so that they bring in additional workforce to back up what needs to happen on Navajo. So the last item I want to cover before I go for questions is the Delcon project, the hospital. The hospital was envisioned some time back, but because we were short on supply, the water was envisioned to come from Loop. There's good water source there, groundwater source, and the IHS and the Navajo Nation both jointly agreed to fund that pipeline. And the IHS construction branch was working on getting the clearances and getting it in a state to be constructed. That process, as we all know, takes a long time. The hospital began construction and projected to be completed long before the pipeline that was designed to serve it is going to be in place. So then there was a scramble trying to look for other water. From the beginning, we knew we didn't have enough water in our system. We were trying to work on enhancing that system, but it was for improvements from Ganado all the way through Lower Greasewood and communities unserved along those routes, and to increase the capacity somewhat. It was not envisioned to supply the volume of water that the hospital needs. So at this point, there's a lot of modification that is needed. It's all being done at the last minute. Ms. Brown and McDonald have both offered technical resource, which means some of their engineering staff to help our engineer that's working on those designs. And so they jointly came up with the conceptual proposal. They're trying to work out the design details, but the overall estimated cost is $5 million. So to correct something that may have been in, I know it was called out, but N2A doesn't believe that it's our customers' responsibility to fund a federal government project. So our customers can't shoulder $5 million, the cost to do that. It's got to come through some other funding process. So I know Honorable Elmer Begay was working at trying to approach, the nation to fund it. N2A suggested part of the money that's already funded for the loop line to be used, take 5 minutes, because it's about a $30-some million project. Those funds are committed already. Our suggestion was to take $5 million from that pot to fund the improvements needed, and then ARPA could be used to replace those dollars. but you need money in hand. It needs to start construction very, very soon in order to be able to meet the needs of the hospital. So even if you put it on ARPA now, with the negotiation.
Could you speak louder? I can't hardly hear you.
Okay. So with the need right now is to build that line as soon as it's designed. And even if you put it on ARPA, the dialogue of the negotiation with everybody trying to get projects funded is probably going to go longer than it's going to be before the construction can start. So there's got to be money found somewhere as soon as it gets prepared for construction. You have to be able to start construction. So there's got to be an existing pot of money where someone can grab $5 million to get that project started. So it's still somewhat in jeopardy to open as it's planned, and there's got to be some way to find $5 million to make that work. So I just wanted to clarify that, and I also wanted to clarify that Intuit's customers are not in a position to foot a $5 million bill. So we'll stand ready for questions on our revised water proposal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuntz, and thank you very much for the presentation. That, colleagues, let me go to the floor. I have Honorable Keelan Begay in the queue at this time, and then I'll go back. At this time, Honorable Keelan Begay is the only one in the queue. So, Jay, the floor is yours.
Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. NTUA, appreciate the presentation. I believe I made a statement or comment with the management of NTUA of why do we have to wait for the funding to come over to start some of these projects. Is there a way that we can make an agreement that a lot of these projects need to continue? Or could the Navajo Nation Council appropriate some funding from certain dollar funding source and then replenish the funding once we get the ARPA funding? Is that possible? And could you provide information or document of how much money the NTUA would need to get these funding, or to get these projects going? The chairman. So that's my specific question to NTUA, and then I'll have a follow-up question.
Any other comments, questions, colleagues, for Mr. Kuntz? Mr. Kuntz, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you. That's a very, very good idea. You know, we are funding some of the clearance work right now, just because we're trying to get projects ready, as many of them ready as possible. But if there was advanced capital dollars, we definitely could start some projects and get them moving. And we can give you a startup cost, maybe from here, you know, say starting construction in a month, and then from here to the end of the year, we could give you a cost in all the utility areas of what we could agree to be advanced. You know, just we want to, of course, we'd have to have some assurance that would stay intact within the ARPA proposal going forward. But we definitely feel that would be a great solution.
Speaker, this is
Thanks. That, I think I heard Honorable Brown. Honorable Brown? Was it you?
yeah. Yes, that was me.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. Ado Besh Basaan, 24th Navajo Nation Council, Naabik'íyáti. Ado, thank you, Mr. Kuntz, for your presentation. I'm glad that you mentioned the Kayenta, the waterline project from the San Juan River to Kayenta. I know that we've been working on that, and there's been a few people, it seems like, who have been involved, including Brown and Caldwell. So who would you recommend? I want to really dive into the work with that to set up a meeting. It is a big project. So we did make an amendment for that. And then you also mentioned that with the Navajo Utah Water Settlement Act that we can use part of that fund, but that would go as far as the Utah state line. And I wish that the 3 states now, including the 4 states, could just see the nation as one big nation, and that states don't stop us from and we can continue to use these funds. But I guess that's another conversation to be had. But with back to the water line from the San Juan River, number one, would we need a water settlement if we were going to tap into the San Juan River from Helchita area to Old Jato to Kayenta? And really, I know the previous conversation with Brown and Caldwell was to extend that line from Kayenta to Chilchimbito and then maybe into Rough Rock and mini farms. What will that look like? And then on the Arizona side, again, would we need a water settlement for that from the San Juan River coming from in the Utah San Juan area? And then the other part would be how far is I know with Kayenta, we did work on the wastewater treatment plant. We are still with the new hospital and with new facilities coming, we would need the wastewater treatment plant. What is usually the timeline on wastewater treatment plants? I know that we wanted it in the same location in that area, and eventually, getting the more water to not just in my area, but Western Agency. We do have a lot of areas where in order for any type of economic development, and the bigger question would also be, we are tapping into the aquifers, and if you can give us the latest information on the status of the aquifer, how much water is in there, how much further can we go on tapping into the aquifer. It would be good to know. I know that we have been in a drought the past 20, 30 years. So what is the aquifer? What's the status of that currently? When was the last data or analysis study that was done on these aquifers? I know that in the Kayenta Peabody mine, they did use a lot of the fresh water, digging over 2,000 feet to get that water. And now there's about 6 to 10 water storage tanks that are up there that are not fully being used right now. And I want to work with, I know my chapters expressed interest in tapping into the water up there for farming and etc. The other thing, also going back to the Navajo-Utah water settlement in San Juan County, is we've been talking, and we did receive reports this morning at the Navajo-Utah Commission meeting, was to tap into or to creating a NAPI2. I think we know that the nation, we do not have a seed bank. We rely on our border towns exclusively almost. That if for some reason, if trucks stop coming to the Navajo Nation, if all the fast food and bashes close, what would the state of the Navajo Nation be in as far as food? We do not have even as simple as food banks, and especially for a seed bank. If anything were to happen, we should be really focused on growing our own food, storing that. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to that, right? Like there's a health component benefit to that. There's actually bringing a little bit of employment, getting our people active on the land again, and really, maybe that will reverse the drought also, is to get back into farmland. For sure, traditionally, we have our stories that complement that. So water, I think I hear some of my colleagues say, if it sounds like a lot of this is going to go back to water projects. And I think we as council, certainly for myself, that's something that I support, if we can just get potable water. But in addition to potable water, would be for agriculture. We do have our farm boards that still exist. And I got to give it to our farmers, including our gardeners who are out there planting and praying for rain and asking for all of this. So if we can come together and have a comprehensive plan, I know that Department of Ag, there is the council did approve the drought insurance to be used on Navajo on farming, and that is a big initiative. And I think, let's just go for the worst case scenario, is what if truckers have stopped coming to Navajos to deliver food? How would our people be, including our animals? If Baxter stop bringing food, if fast food stop making food for us to drive up and get our food, well, what is it that we can really fall back on besides our sheep, for those who have sheep and cows, etc.? And I think as a nation, that's something we need to, instead of waiting for something catastrophic to happen like that, and that's something I have learned from this pandemic, is, relying on the outside way too much. We need to build on Navajo. We need to build our food source. We need to build and plant on Navajo. And I think with your historical knowledge in the water area and wastewater area, this would be really important on planning for the future. And again, Kayenta, we have been looking downstream on the Laguna Creek, where we can have a reservoir, where we can have water. And I think even if we can have like Phoenix and these deserts, how they have water sitting there in these posh neighborhoods, and it's evaporating. But yet we're not doing that here. And when the wind blows, all that sand, and then there's more sand dunes that are being created every time it blows, it seems like, with all the feral horses. But back to water in your presentation. I'm really interested in the work, and besides Brown and Caldwell, who else are you working directly with them, or do you have your own specific team? If so, we want to have a meeting with Western Agency and continue to do planning for our area and water. And it's definitely our job as elected individuals to bring water to our communities, so we can build on our communities. So I'm really interested in that, and really thinking 20, 50, 100 years from today, what are we going to leave for our children more than 7 generations from today? So it's a huge concern for us. So this is where we will continue to follow the litigation in Arizona and continue to educate our people. At this moment in time, unfortunately, we have to have these water settlements, and that's entirely separate than another Senate bill for potable water as well. The potable water, I know that's number one on Navajo Nation on the leadership's agenda with these ARPA funds. So again, if we can, you're asking for about $5 million. I mean, even like to get that amount of money. My question to OMB and Controller's office is, can we use the CARES Act funding for that so NCOA can continue to do their job and the resources that they need? And then we will continue so there's no stopping, pausing, or slowing down any of this work that's currently going on. So those are the questions and the comments that I have. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Honorable Brown. With that, colleagues, any other comments, questions?
Speaker, this is Delegate McGay.
Honorable Brigade, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Speaker. Members of the Naabik'íyáti Committee. Mr. Kuntz. Good afternoon to you, and then your staff there with you. I know that you didn't mention this, Mr. Kuntz. I know that we're talking about water line coming to community, like for example, getting more water to improve water system quantity to the Alcon area. But at the end of the day, of all this, even though from the one that we're talking about, from the South to Dalcon lateral water line, we're just talking about water line, but we don't discuss or mention the wastewater. Where does water go at the end of the day? Where does it go? What do we need to do with wastewater that are being used? And like the old people, my people, they're talking about drilling well out in the loop areas for this southwest part of the reservation. And they're saying that if we drill water into the sea aquifer, that really, it's been there for so million years, that water, pristine water and fresh water. Once we take it up, all we want that water is to wash it off with it. We don't really drink it, and we just use it for restroom. This potable water was good for how many more years? We just can use it for that to wash ourselves with it. There's no any type of preserving and to conserve that. There's nothing that in our mind as human beings, being a net people, it's all we think is about water, but the wastewater, what can be happening, can we be reused and things like that for agricultural product, purposes. Very good quality water. I know that you didn't mention that, but I know that NTA is responsible for wastewater, the waters there, and things like that. So right now, I don't know any, for example,
Thank you, Honorable Brigade. With that, let me go ahead and go back to Ms. Kuntz.
Okay, thank you. Let me try to answer Delegate Brown's questions first. Yeah, the bigger plan, with the large water allows us to do all kind of things. I mean, you start having the amount of flow for agricultural projects, for livestock supply, for all of those things, and a lot of the work that Jason John's group is trying to take the water from the settlement and moving it across Navajo. And then once that's done, then all these other projects become possible. So I think if we're going to fund something, my recommendation would be to look at those bulk water movement projects that Jason has on his list and try to work towards having those funded so we can move the water where it needs to go. And in the meantime, we have a few years we could plan heavily based on the routings, because he has routings. There are maps of the routings. If you could try to envision future plans for those things around those routings, so that you're close and in and around where those things will be. You had mentioned that Brown and Caldwell had spoken of taking the water beyond Kayenta, and those way back were not part of the original envisioning. That's something that we pushed very, very hard, a few of us, handful of us, was to bring that water all the way down along the base of the mountain, even tie it back into mini farms, and mini farms to Chinle. Chinle's only got, about 13 miles or so between Chinle and Burnside. You could tie that line together and actually move all the way more water towards Burnside into Ganado and back into Lower Greasewood. So you could regionalize those systems with the volume of water that's coming. But those intertie projects and those bridge projects are not funded at this point. They're not part of any settlement. Now you have the opportunity during the Arizona water rights settlement to try to get some of those interties into that settlement. That way they may get funded in that opportunity. As far as consultants, we work with Brown and Caldwell, Smith Engineering. We have a number of them that we've worked with projects, and these firms have worked on Navajo quite extensively, so they're pretty familiar with things here. And that's one advantage is, we do bid them out, but a lot of them already have previous experience. So we try to go with the most qualified and those that have great experience, so they understand the lineage of projects that we're doing. With regard to wastewater, we are working through wastewater. We're envisioning, again, the bigger plan of how these water rights settlement will move water around. We're trying to upsize the major system. So we have a large wastewater plants already under design. Some are close to being completed. All of those have to be reviewed and approved by both Navajo and federal EPAs, and they have to agree with our design. So that's a long governmental process. But we're going through those. We got projects planned for the Kayenta plant, a Tuba City plant, Shiprock plant, a Chinle plant. There's a number of those where we're trying to accommodate, and we've already done some building on our own, looking for funding ourselves, and we did a whole new plant in Window We had to combine 6 different sources of money to build that plant, but it's in service now, and that's in anticipation of Navajo Gallup water coming into Say Bonito and Window. And you'll see on Jason John's project, one of those bulk water lines is that line that ties in into Say Bonito. So part of that will actually bring that water that far and cross that line. And so those things are all envisioned, and they're previously thought through. Some of them have been, some of the designs are starting to be completed. That's part of what Brown and Caldwell is doing. with both N2A and water management, is starting to finalize some of those designs. So you'll see also projects up in the Lachi area with regard to that mine and some of the water source. There's an intake that pulls water out of Lake Powell. That would be generally the source for moving water south once an Arizona settlement is done. But you could get those core things in place, and the settlement could pay for the major bulk of the improvements. But some of the stuff we could, as it's getting designed, we could fund and get them in place and start delivering some water to the area up there. So you'll as you see those projects, and we're talking about how this whole global plan should work, you'll start to see how those things tie together and how they fit into the bigger pieces of the puzzle. So we are trying to accommodate with a wastewater element. That's another thing that was left out of the water settlements was they forgot to acknowledge that all water coming in has to also be disposed of. So we're pushing the litigators on the Arizona side to look at the possibility of funding some wastewater plants as part of the settlement so that it's more of a complete package. We're also very heavily advocating for storage on Navajo, further spread around Navajo, so you could deposit that bulk water and hold on to retain it. Now, reservoirs would be a very good tie-in to agriculture because it's much more efficient to feed water out of a reservoir into an irrigation system than it is to try to pull it out of a pipeline. There's all those types of things that are kind of envisioned in the background of how to facilitate the great volumes of water that the nation is gaining right to. So the farming, the agriculture, creating Navajo self-sustainability. Delegate Brown, you talked about what happens if Bashas pulls out and doesn't have a grocery store. How do we supply ourselves? But not going to that extreme. If we did produce a product, organic product here, you could sell the Bashas. You could supply them from local product and have Navajo product flowing through those grocery food chains. They would probably enjoy having that because it's a local source, and they would cut down on their transportation and supply, and it would be an immediate fresh source, and it definitely is a healthier source. When you have to harvest, preserve, and then transport, that's where preservatives get injected into a lot of products. And if you have an organic product, it's taken right out of the field to the marketplace, then you don't have to have all the preservatives in it, and it is much healthier for our people and for everybody that consumes it. So those are great envisioning projects that make sense. But first things first, you got to get the water moved. Then in second, you got to plan out those projects and start envisioning where to put them that would be most effective. And then the third part is getting them to funded and executed. So great vision and forethought by you all as Navajo Nation Council, looking way into the future, and the decisions that you make may go beyond your time as leadership, or even in our generation of leadership. And this sets a great foundation for the nation to get self-sustainable supply and to become more independent. So getting back to the Delcon, there is going to be a new wastewater plant, not new wastewater plant, but an improved wastewater plant that's coming out of that project. They did not have the funds to do some additional things that won't affect the functionality, but it protects the longevity and the protection of it. So there's flood protection that is needed, and they don't have the dollars for that. We gave them, we did the groundwork. We gave them an estimate as technical assistance to them, and quoted them a dollar amount, but they couldn't come up with the dollars to do it. So that is also in our proposal. You'll see it as the Winslow Healthcare Center, Delcon Lagoon flood protection. It's a pretty expensive piece of work, but it'll keep it protected when there's any kind of flooding, and for the possibility of a 100-year flood where you have a huge flood. It'll protect it and keep it from being overflowed and pushing all that wastewater out on the ground. So those things are necessary and needed, and we're trying to make those adaptations of assisting where we can. But wastewater is definitely in our minds. We always think water in is water out. So you got to have those components in there. And we have projects like that within our proposal. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kuntz. Again, colleagues, are there any other further questions at this time? I know Mr. Kuntz sent that report, and maybe that's something we could do is re-look at that report, Mr. Kuntz, and thank you very much for that update, and then we can go there. We might have to come back and bring you back again, as there might be some collaboration recommendations that are coming down the pipeline. So I think those are the conversations we've been having periodically through this process too as well. So most importantly, thank you very much to you and your team for really helping assist and stepping up to the plate and working together with not only IHS, but also with Water Management Branch too as well. So again, colleagues, are there any further comments or questions at this time? And twice, and 3 times. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Kuntz, and thank you very much for you and your team again. And again, thank you very much for IHS, Ms. Brown and Mr. McDonald, and then Mr. Jason John, always your expertise and the willingness that you bring to the dedication to making sure that you can help assist the Navajo Nation. So I say thank you to all 3, the water resources departments and water, overall goal of I indicated as a braid of intertwining working relationship that you guys have. So thank you very much for being here with us. I know there are some avenues that we're working on offline with Mr. Jason John, as the colleagues indicated, maybe some follow-up recommendations. So Mr. John, look out for that. We'll be reaching out to you from the speaker's office to IHS. We'll definitely try to see if there can be a leadership roundtable discussion to see if there's any more that we can do to help bring more additional services from the federal government to really help move some of these projects through the process with the lack of manpower, but most importantly, I guess the urgency and the need that we need here at the Navajo Nation. So we'll be working together with you as well, Mr. McDonald, Ms. Brown, and then also reaching out to Ms. So too on that level, so that again, there'd be that discussion. And of course, Mr. Kuntz, thank you for your leadership. I know through the back draw, I know that we can continue to have these discussions. And then after that, moving forward, we can definitely try to identify specifics that are needed. And not only maybe categorizing what's a priority in ARPA, and then also categorizing what could be a priority in all the other federal funds that are coming down too as well. As you indicated, there's other avenues of funding that's available. And I think I did indicate that too at the beginning of the work session, or actually when I took over the work session after Vice Chair Smith led it off the procession this morning. So again, thank you to everyone on the line. Colleagues, we will follow up with not only these 3 resources, but continue to have that dialogue. Tomorrow, we're going to be discussing power lines, electricity hookup, not only from NTUA, but also all the co-ops who we have mandated and had further discussions with them that are primarily on the outskirts and Arizona, and then most of service areas outside of Big Navajo and Eastern Agency. So Again, thank you very much. So we'll be having that discussion tomorrow at 10 a.m. Without further ado, thank you everyone for being on the line again. Thank you to the presenters. At 5:20 p.m., we'll go ahead and adjourn at this time. Kat, have a good evening, everyone. Stay safe. Go on it.
Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker.
Nope.